April 30th, 1975. 54 tanks of the People's Army of Vietnam smashed through the gates of the Independence Palace, and the bells announcing the end of the war rang out over Saigon. The city, once the vibrant capital of the South, fell amid smoke, sirens, and the despair of those trying to escape. This fall was more than a military defeat. It was the inescapable symbol of American failure and the close of an era of interventionism. That morning marked the end of the Vietnam War, and also the brutal closure of an age of imperial arrogance. Today, we relive those final hours when thunder and shame sealed one of the most symbolic defeats of the 20th century. The story that ended with helicopters lifting off from Saigon's rooftops began 2 decades earlier in a world defined by the Cold War. It began in 1954 when the French, defeated at Dien Bien Phu, abandoned Vietnam. The Geneva Accords were signed, dividing the country along the 17th parallel. The Communist North, under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh, and the South, backed by the United States as a barrier against the red tide in Asia. Washington did not see merely a country, but a key piece on the global chessboard. According to the domino theory, if Vietnam fell into the grip of communism, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and other Asian nations would follow. That is why, from 1965 onward, the United States hurled itself into a war far from home. More than 500,000 soldiers fought in hostile jungles against a ferocious enemy, the Viet Cong and the North's regular army. They unleashed massive bombing, napalm, and bloody offensives like the Tet Offensive in 1968. Nothing was enough to break Vietnamese resistance. The conflict left more than 2 million Vietnamese dead and over 60,000 American soldiers. What began as an intervention to stop communism turned into a bottomless quagmire. It was the war that proved not everything can be bought with military might. Sometimes the spirit of a people prevails, and what starts as intervention ends as defeat. Vietnam became the starkest mirror of a superpower's failure. The countdown to the fall of Saigon was already underway. In 1973, the Paris Peace Accords marked the official withdrawal of U.S. troops from Vietnam. Washington left with the promise that South Vietnam would hold out. But signatures on paper do not armor a country, and the withdrawal brought no peace. It merely exposed the fragility of a government propped up more by foreign dollars than by the loyalty of its people. While speeches were celebrated in Saigon, the final conquest was being planned in Hanoi. The objective was clear and direct: take the capital and reunify the country by force. In March 1975, the Northern Offensive began. City after city, the South's defenses collapsed without offering real resistance. On April 9th, fighting reached Xuan Loc, the last significant stronghold. There, for a few days, the South Vietnamese army fought with ferocity. It was not enough. And when that district fell, the last vestige of hope crumbled. Most unsettling was that barely a month earlier, the CIA and U.S. military intelligence had signed a secret memorandum. In it, they assured that South Vietnam still had the capacity to resist, at least until early 1976. Reality on the ground showed how disconnected those forecasts were from the soil under their boots. Helicopters carrying Marines arrived, but it was not enough. As northern divisions tightened the noose around Saigon, the government's morale disintegrated. President Nguyen Van Thieu, abandoned by his American allies, resigned and fled. Political leadership turned into a parade of ghosts. Diplomacy was no longer an option, and Saigon was condemned. The city, once known as the Paris of the Orient, became a field of refugees and fear. Crowds overwhelmed foreign embassies. Entire families tried to escape by sea or air, clinging to any hope of flight. Some sold everything in a matter of hours. Others simply waited for their fate.
At daybreak on April 28th, South Vietnamese troops faced North Vietnamese commandos at the Newport Bridge. They were at the gates of Saigon.
April 29th, 1975. The roar of northern artillery hammered the edge of the city, and the first shells fell on Tan Son Nhat, the main airport. The runway became a graveyard of smoking aircraft, and those projectiles sealed a message that had already become a scream. There was no way out, neither by land nor by air. Then the White House activated Operation Frequent Wind, the largest helicopter evacuation airlift in history. It was not a strategic retreat, nor heroism. It was panic with wings.
North Vietnamese artillery was falling intermittently on the airfield. We no longer had any capability to use fixed-wing airplanes, that is, for the evacuation because of the artillery fire on the airstrip. I told the ambassador that we didn't have a great deal of time left, that we would probably have to leave that night. He went into my other office where I still had one secure telephone operating, and at that time got authority to begin the evacuation from the embassy.
Hundreds of helicopters, along with CIA aircraft, cut through the skies from building rooftops, hotels, and the roof of the U.S. Embassy, bound for carriers anchored in the South China Sea. C-130S tried to take off from more distant bases, but the sky was a trap packed with enemy fire. The American embassy became the epicenter of the collapse. Along the perimeter wall, thousands of Vietnamese crowded together, shouting, crying, climbing fences under the sun and the reek of gunpowder. Outside, women begged with babies in their arms, handing them to soldiers without knowing if they would ever see them again. Inside, employees shredded documents, diplomats prayed in silence, and helicopters touched down on the rooftop every 10 minutes.
The embassy was completely surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of Vietnamese at the three entrances.
The rooftop images captured the humiliation of a superpower. A helicopter lifted off with a handful of evacuees while hundreds were left behind. Specters of a broken promise. This was the photograph that defined the war. For hours, the roar of rotor blades was the only comfort. It is estimated that more than 7,000 people were evacuated by air in barely 24 hours, but thousands more were left on the ground. At dawn, the helicopters stopped coming. The last Marine left the embassy as the thunder of communist troops drew nearer. Finally, the sky cleared, the doors closed, and the silence that followed was more brutal than any explosion. On April 30th, 1975, at 11:30 in the morning, the doors of the Independence Palace opened without a shot. A column of T-54 tanks from the People's Army of Vietnam smashed the iron gate and halted at the steps. No one met them in battle. Resistance had been smothered, and what remained of the political command awaited the inevitable. From inside, Duong Van Minh, president of South Vietnam for barely 43 hours, spoke a few words over the radio. "We surrender power unconditionally. We hope to avoid further bloodshed." There was no applause and no relief, only the march of boots across marble and the rise of a new red flag with a golden star at its center. Thus, unification was signed with gunpowder. The city that had once symbolized the Western project in Asia changed its name in honor of the communist leader who had dreamed of a united Vietnam.
The city of Saigon was renamed today. The victorious communists who forced the city's surrender said the capital of South Vietnam henceforth will be known as Ho Chi Minh City.
But peace did not arrive automatically. Inside the liberated city, a deep and brutal process of control began. Mass arrests, re-education camps, executions, censorship, and persecutions. Those who had collaborated with the United States or with the Southern government were branded enemies of the people. For many, liberation sounded like a sentence for half a nation. Even so, it was not all revenge. The North sought to rebuild as well. The country was devastated after decades of war, infrastructure in ruins, millions displaced, orphans, and an economic system on the brink of collapse. The new government's priority was to consolidate communist power, unify the political system, and above all, demonstrate that it could govern the entire nation. The fall of Saigon was not only the end of a war, it was the collapse of a shared illusion. For millions of Vietnamese, it meant the crumbling of a promise of freedom. For the United States, it was the moral blow of a superpower forced to accept its bitterest defeat. The images of the evacuation were etched into collective memory. In Vietnam, many celebrated reunification, while others began a silent exile. In the United States, patriotism turned into a question, and Vietnam became more than a place. It became a wound. Today, Ho Chi Minh City beats as a moving metropolis, while on the other side of the world, the memory of a war still lives on, one that left scars deeper than any victory. We have reached the end. If you liked this video, do not forget to subscribe. We await you in our next episode as we continue discovering military history.